So I'd like to invite a few speakers, and the first speaker will be Cheryl Beckett.
You know, I think I was going to have a problem with this. When Cheryl would always ask me, so what's your goal in life? And I always would say, I don't know. But Cheryl did. She knew exactly what she believed that she needed to help everybody. She never met a person she didn't like. No matter how badly they treated her later, she never changed her mind. She was an amazing person. So I know people are going to come up here and tell you a lot of things. I thought, well, why don't you hear it from my perspective? So, I always thought I could talk without a speaker. I could talk to the back of the room, but who knows? Cheryl had two things. One was to help people, and one was to work. She didn't believe she shouldn't work. I would tell her repeatedly, let it go, let it go. No, no. My mom told me I'm supposed to work. So she worked all the time. In fact, the day she died, she talked to me about making sure that I gave money to the TM school in Fairfield. Why should we be worried about that? I don't know. But they got their money. She was very organized. The obituary that you have read, she wrote several years before she died. She wanted to have everything ready. So the only thing I had to fill in was the date and the cause of death. Everything else was done, which was good, because I wouldn't have remembered everything she did. But in 1993, I took a client out to lunch, and we got talking about meditation, and she mentioned she had just taken transcendental meditation. And I said, well, why don't you give me the name of the person you took it from? And so she did, and it was Cheryl. So I show up at Cheryl's door. I'm an insurance agent at the time, and I'm wearing a suit and tie. And what she doesn't tell me is that she had her Jody scar, which is like a horoscope, but it's much more detailed. He had told her that someone of the world, not of TM, would show up at her door and have a mole on his right cheek. Anyway, so meditation is done over a 4-day period, and I always noticed that I was spending a little bit more time after it was done talking. And being a divorced man and being single for a long time and being somewhat shy around women, I finally said to her, do you dance? And she said, oh yeah. I said, well, you know, there's a cowboy bar out on Mulberry that has dances. Would you like to go? She said, sure. So somewhere before that happened, she called me on the phone. She said, I have a group of friends. She had her and her previous husband had 3 other couples that they did everything together. And they were going to go to see John Denver. And she said, would you like to go? I said, sure. So it was going to be on a Saturday. And so I lived up in Masonville. Anybody knows where that is? It's 10 miles out of town. And so I drove down, and I go to the door, and I knock on the door. There's nobody home. Now, Cheryl always did multiple things. You might do one major thing in a day. Cheryl always did at least 3. So she was off boating somewhere, and she said, so I drove home, the 10 miles back to Masonville. And as I'm walking to the door, the phone's ringing. I pick up the phone, and it's Cheryl. She said, aren't you going with me? I said, I came and you weren't there. She said, oh, well, you should have known. I always have lots of things to do. And the door wasn't locked anyway. You should have. In fact, she never even had a key to the house. Because she trusted people. So she said, why don't you come on back down? So I said, okay. So I drove back down. Now, these three other couples, one man was a judge. One man was a professor at the University of Colorado State, and the other one was the principal of an elementary school. And they all loved Cheryl. So from Denver, from Fort Collins to Denver, they put me through the ringer. Asking me all kinds of questions. I must have succeeded. So I said to Cheryl after a bit, I said, well, we should get married. And she said, well, I've tried it a couple times and it hasn't worked out. We're going to have to do a Jodish. And you're going to have to, you and I are going to have to be 85% compatible. I'm not married yet. I used to tell people that she married me because I had insurance, health insurance. So we did get the Jodish done. I had to find, I didn't know I was born at home. So I didn't know what time I was born. And my mother and father were dead. And my sisters were pretty young when I was born, but they finally figured out it was at least in the afternoon, so that it was very important and they had to know what time. So they did the Jodish, and obviously I got 85%. Now, our house was not like anybody else's house. Not only did people come there, not only did she have a preschool Monday through Friday in the morning, and she did counseling in the afternoon, and she sold shackling. We also had weekend retreats with the TM people. So people would show up at our house on Friday and stay till Sunday. I'm talking about 6 or 7 people. We would have them out on the porch. We would have them in each of the bedrooms, everywhere. And anyways, and that happened on a regular basis, at least probably once a month. So now I'm a man, so I'm very logical. So that's my problem. Cheryl wasn't. So anyway, we redo the bedroom and the master bath, and we put on a new porch. We take out a wall between 2 bedrooms so I can have a big workout room. And shortly after that happened, she comes home, and she and Martha had been over to look at a house. Now, we had been talking about downsizing. Our house was about 2,000 square feet. We were talking about downsizing because it was only the 2 of us. Anyways, we bought a house on Mulberry, as you all know. It was 4,300 square feet. It had 2 living rooms, 2 kitchens, 2 laundry rooms, 7 bedrooms. Did I say family room? No, I didn't say family room. So now, what she had decided was that she could help a lot of people. Because if you sold Shackley or whatever it was, and you wanted to have a meeting, you had to go to the, one of the hotels, and their rooms were very expensive, so she was going to be able to allow them to have less expense. Plus, she belonged to all kinds of groups. She belonged to the Women of Peace and Justice. She belonged to, I can't even name all of them. I'm sure you'll hear them all eventually as time goes on. But they also met there with their meetings. Now, when they would have these big meetings, they would take over our living room. And the family room was off to one side by itself. And so I basically had control of the family room. Everything else was taken over. And so one of these logical men that were there at this meeting, they said to me, does it bother you to have all these people in your house? I said, no, as long as they don't come in the family room. So we had concerts, we had record couples, people that were having their recording, had a record that they wanted to put out, and so we'd have a big concert. Our living room could handle 45 chairs. It was a big, big room. So then, and it's always kind of a blur. So then she's still working. She's still working on the. She would get an idea, and there was no idea that she couldn't do. I'll give you another example. We go to New Orleans, and in New Orleans at night they have ghost tours. So I say to her, that's all I do is I just say to her, you know, maybe we ought to do something like that for Collins. When she gets back, she goes over, she buys a dress pattern, she goes over, she has her mother sew a 1890s dress. And she starts checking out the famous women of Fort Collins, and she settles on Lady Catherine Moon. And she finds the lady, her last name was Albright, and actually I had her insurance. But she had written a book. There's lots of interconnections here. She had written a book about Lady Moon, so Cheryl read the book. And then she wanted to be able to do a tour in Old Town. So she got a historian, whose name I can't remember, and he's not here to tell me what his name is. He took us around all the buildings and told Cheryl what had been there. It had been a bank, it had been a whatever. And so when she gave her tours, she would do that. And so she not only did tours, then she signed up for First Night. So for about 4 or 5 years, First Night was the day before New Year's, and nobody knows about it. And she would have a tour. And I would wait for her to get done, and then we would go around and do the rest of the things that were available on First Night. She found out that there was a black man in the neighborhood. It was not in my neighborhood, but a black man who was being treated very poorly. I'll give you an example. The guy across the street would come down and stand in front of his house and yell at him. Come out, you enter, you guys are done, and run. And so somehow or other, Cheryl found out about him. So she figured out how to help him move to a more pleasant place. He had an extra car. Well, I was in the insurance business, so I had a client who was a tow truck driver, and I got him to volunteer his time to move his car. Cheryl never lost track of anybody. Another example in our house. When she turns 50, she invites her girlfriends from high school. How many people here, if you were 50 years old, would even know who the hell you went to school with? Oh no, sure, a whole bunch. 6 or 8 women show up at our house for a weekend. Retreat for their 55th or 50th birthday. And then we were going to have something outside with music. And so Cheryl, being the person she is, she invites the neighbors on both sides and behind us because she doesn't want to disturb anybody. She wants to let them know that it's there and they can kind of come up. I'm not following my speech very well. I have no idea where I am. But I knew I was going to remember a whole bunch of random things that happened. But Cheryl would help people that maybe shouldn't have gotten help. We had a 4 apartment complex on Smith Street. And she heard that this one woman needed help. This was several years ago, so she puts her in there. But the thing is the woman cooks with lots of spices and so on, and so the whole place would smell it. And then she doesn't pay her rent. So we finally got her out. But that didn't stop Cheryl. We had other places where somebody got evicted because she would give them a break. here's a classic. Somehow or other, these two teenagers are married. They're not even 18, so they can't sign a lease. So Cheryl decides, well, heck, we'll get their parents to sign the lease, and they'll be fine. Well, it turns out the kids were losers, and so were their parents. So we never got any rent, except the first month, until we could get them out. She was prolific. She finished at CSU a bachelor's and a master's degree in 4 years, while working full-time at Piggly Wiggly. That was one of the stores over here in town. When her and her husband moved to Aspen to be ski instructors, in the summertime she slept in a tent and bathed in the creek. And she had a business called Cheryl's Cycle. It was a motorized thing with an ice box on the front that sold popsicles and stuff. And she did that for several years. And then she went to work in a bakery. She was always working. And she was always very interested in TM. So we went back many times to Fairfield. And the way the TM movement works is this. Once you've been a meditator, you can go anywhere and meditate with another group. So we would have lots of people who had just moved to town. They'd never been indoctrinated by Cheryl. They would show up at her house and they would meditate. She also always, if you needed it, she would check your mantra, because that's part of this thing. She did lots of stuff that didn't necessarily generate any money. But at the same time, she was also helping all kinds of people with their nutrition. So she had a Shackley business. Now, I still get a check. Last month, my check was $1,200. I haven't done anything. Except the people who she helped and know how good Shackley is are still buying it, and I still get an override. Let me read my notes here. Oh, during the time that she helped the black man, she discovered there was a group called Not in Your Town Alliance. It was formed in Oregon or Washington, and it was formed because some kids had paper menorahs in their window, and people threw rocks through the window and spray painted the house. So the painters union came and painted the house, and everybody in that town, they printed a menorah in the newspaper, and everybody in their town put it in their window. Anyway, so Cheryl formed the Not in the Town Alliance. Found some people who were interested in helping, and there's lots of things that go on in this town you think might be a very mellow town. It isn't. There's still lots of people who are bigoted in a big way. Oh, she also ran our rental properties. And I noticed the two of my renters are here, so I was thinking, this is the kind of thing she would do. If you were a friend of Cheryl's, on May Day, she would go to your house and leave flowers. Because that's what you do on May Day, if you're Cheryl. And she would do that for all our renters. And on Christmas, she would leave them all a gift every year. Because that was Cheryl. You can see why they might have shown up, because they weren't just treated like renters, they were treated like family. You know, when I was 18 years old, I couldn't remember who my kindergarten teacher was. Probably most of you couldn't either. But that wasn't Cheryl's case. When her preschoolers graduated from high school, we took them to dinner. those kids remembered so many things that went on in the preschool. They were just unbelievable. She just loved everybody. Like I say, she was concerned about me and everybody else, even when she was dying. It wasn't, that's the way she was. And I can tell you one thing. I'm a better man because I met her, and I miss her like hell. Cheryl did so many wonderful things that I forget things. She didn't have any children of her own, but the 4 children that were her second husband's children, she kept track of them, she kept track of their kids and their grandkids and their great-grandkids. Now, an example of keeping track, we made 4 different trips to Disneyland with grandkids. Some of them were mine, but most of them were those ones that really weren't related to her at all. And of course, Cheryl had to be creative. So the first time we went by plane. The next time we went by motorhome. The next time we went by train. And I made the kids keep track of all the different ways we would go. When we went by train, because the train lets you off in Oakland. And we started out in San Francisco, obviously. Disneyland is in San Francisco. We went out there different times because those grandkids, those other grandkids were living in California, and they were graduating from high school, and we had to be there. And so we took the grandkids with us. So anyway, so I made the kids keep track of all the different ways we traveled. So we started out, we went by car, and then we went by train. Then we went by bus. Then we walked. And the next day we went by cable car. Then we went by streetcar. Then we went out to Alcatraz, so we went by boat. And when we came back, Cheryl and the girls went by rickshaw up to the chocolate factory. And then we got on a train and we went down to do the Disneyland and the graduation. And then we went by limousine. So, anyways, that was my fun part, is making the kids keep track of all the different ways we went. She loved everybody. I mean, when she left me, I think I told you that the obituary was already pre-written. She also had written up what things that people should get, including money. It's just that she had to take care of everybody. And the one grandkid that wasn't 18, she told me to tell that she couldn't have the money until she was 18. Or he was 18, she, I guess it is. So, at any rate, just a couple more things that she did that you wouldn't have known about if you hadn't been with me. Thanks.